Welcome to OriGene's webinar on KO lysates and KO validated antibodies. So today we are going to talk about antibody, which is the most popular research tools in the lab. Its popularity is due to its perceived specificity. Note that I use the word perceived as the specificity is a relative term. While antibody manufacturers, vendors, users all try to use various means to provide evidence that the antibody is specific, yet there is always some blind faith in this topic. Have you ever noticed that while other experiments all need negative controls, it is rarely presented in an antibody application? So with the advance of CRISPR technology, knockout cells, where the target gene is removed at a genomic level, can be produced in a practical way. So together with these parental cells, the knockout cells, here referred as KO cells, served as a perfect negative control for antibody validation. So OriGene recognized the growing demand for positive and negative controls in antibody application, especially in Western blot. So using our CRISPR expertise, we not only created over 1,000 KO lysates, turning them into a product. We also use such lysate as negative control and test our catalog antibodies. Those passed such rigorous tests were branded as KO validated, and those failed will be are removed from our website. So much for the prelude. So now I'm delighted to give you the mic to Dr. Xiaojie Li for the real story. So in next half an hour, about half an hour, she will tell you more about our antibody validation and our KO lysates. A few logistic issues. All of you are currently muted during the session. So if you have any questions, please use the question box in the control panel where you can type in while you have the question. And those questions will be addressed at the end of the session for a dedicated Q&A session. And also this presentation is downloadable as handout during the session. You can see that also at the control panel. So without further ado, here's our antibody leader, Dr. Xiaojie Li. Xiaojie.
Thank you, Xuan. I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Today we're going to talk about the new approach that we use for the antibody validation, which is using a knockout cell lysate to verify the specificity of our antibodies. First is the outline of today's talk. We are going to start the presentation with an overview of antibody validations. So in this part, we're going to talk about why do we need antibody validation and how to validate the antibodies. Second part of the presentation will focus on the validation using a knockout cell lysate. And here we are talking about what is a knockout cell, how do we make the lysate from this knockout cell, and how to use this knockout cell lysate to validate our antibodies. And finally, how to interpret the data. And the last part of the talk, I want to talk about the knockout products that we provide at OriGene, which including the knockout cell lysate and knockout validated antibody. Now let's start the presentation with the question, why do we need antibody validation? There is a critical need for the antibody validation because lack of validation has been reported in many cases to cause a waste of research time and money. And these days, more and more journals and ground reviewers start requiring the validation data of antibodies. So to help our customer to be more successful in their research, we have been working hard to improve the standard of our antibody validation. So how do we validate the antibodies at OriGene? In this slide, I have classified the validation method into two different categories: application validation and specificity validation. Application validations include all the major applications for antibody, such as Western blotting, flow cytometry, immunofluorescence, immunohistochemistry, and immunoprecipitation. These are all the routine QC tests we do for our antibody. And you can find all the verified applications under the product description of our antibody product. In addition to the application validation, we also do the specificity validation. Specificity is one of the most important attributes of antibody. If the antibody is not specific, you can get a misleading data that can lead to some incorrect conclusion. So at OriGene, we have used many methods to verify the specificity of our antibodies. I'll talk about this method in more details in the next slide. So here I have listed all the major methods that we use at OriGene to verify the specificity of our antibody product. That includes Western blot with different lysate samples, such as the overexpression lysate that's made from the transfected cell line, and endogenous lysate made from the native cells or tissue. We also use independent antibody analysis to test the specificity of our antibody. This method using a different antibodies against the same protein target to do the test and to verify the specificity by comparing the data from different antibodies. Another unique method we use at OriGene is called 10K protein chip technology. This is using the protein microarray technology to test the cross-reactivity of antibody against more than 10,000 proteins at the same time. The last method, which is going to be the focus for today's talk, is the validation using a knockout cell lysate. So I'll go through each of these methods with some real experimental data and focus on the last method for the second part of my presentation. Now let's start with the first method we use for antibody validation, which is Western blot using an overexpression lysate. In this slide, I'm going to show you some real experimental data for this method. Here is the Western blot analysis for one of our anti-Her2 antibody. And the SKU number for that antibody is UM50036. In this Western blot, we have used overexpression lysate and the control lysate. So the line 1 contains the overexpression lysate prepared from the 293 cell that's transfected with human Her2 seeding clone. This clone encoded a full-length human Her2 protein with a C-terminal MYC-BDK tag. And then line 2 contains the control lysate that's made from the 293 cells transfected with an empty expression vector. The only difference between these two lines is the Her2 clone that transfected into the cells. So what do you expect to see from this type of test? You want to see the higher expression of the target protein in the overexpression lysate. And here we can see this antibody pick up a single band in the overexpression lysate and has no signal in the control lysate. So the next, we want to make sure this band actually runs at the expected molecular weight. The predicted size for the human Her2 protein is 140 kilodalton. However, this band runs a little bit higher than that. It's closer to the 170 kilodalton. There are two possible reasons for this. One, it could be a specific Her2 protein, but with some post-translational modifications, such as phosphorylation or glycosylation. This modification can cause the band shift to a higher molecular weight. Another possibility is this band could be a non-specific banding of a different protein that may be introduced by the overexpressed Her2 protein. That's why you can only see this band in overexpression lysate, but not in the control lysate. To further test these two possibilities, we have used a second method, which is called independent antibody analysis. If you remember, I mentioned previously, this method using different antibodies against the same protein target to do the test. So here we use 3 other anti-Her2 antibodies, and one of the anti-tag, which is against the C-terminal tag of that overexpressed protein, to test the same overexpression samples. And if you compare the data from all these different antibodies, you can see the exactly same band at 170 kilodaltons in overexpression lysate, and still no signal in the control lysate. Because the chance for different antibodies to detect the same non-specific band is very low. So now we can feel more confident to say this 170 kilodalton band is actually the real overexpressed human Her2 protein. And this Western blot data can be used to prove the specific binding of our anti-Her2 antibodies. A quick summary about these two data. The tag overexpression lysate can be used as a good positive control for the antibody validation in the Western blot analysis. In fact, we have used this tag overexpression lysate to test majority of our primary antibodies. And these lysates are not only used internally for our antibody validation, we also provide this lysate as a standard lysate product to the scientists. So each of these lysates contains 1 well of overexpression cell lysate, 1 well of the control lysate made from the anti-vector transfect cells, and 1 well of the SDS sample buffer. This lysate is ready to use for your Western blot analysis. You don't have to do the CD cloning, protein expression, and lysate preparation to do the test. You can get this lysate direct from OriGene. We have made more than 18,000 overexpression lysates for the human protein. That covers almost 90% of the complete human genome. So it's very likely you can find the right lysate for your target gene from OriGene. Here I have also included the URL for our overexpression lysate product page. You can find more information and search for your own lysate from this product page. Powered by this large collection of overexpression lysate, we have developed another unique method, which is called 10K protein chip method to test the antibody specificity. So for this method, we have printed more than 10,000 overexpression human protein lysate on a high-density protein microarray, and using this microarray to test the cross-reactivity of our antibody. Here, I'm showing the data from the same anti-Her2 antibody. It's the UM50036. And this antibody shows a specific binding to the Her2 protein on this 10K protein chip. And it doesn't recognize any other protein on the chip. So this provides another strong evidence for the specificity of this anti-Her2 antibody. In addition to the overexpression lysate, we also verify the specificity of antibodies with endogenous lysate in a Western blot analysis. So I'm showing here again the same data, the data from the same anti-Her2 antibodies. This antibody has been used to test the endogenous Her2 protein in different cell lines and also different tissues. From this data, you can see this antibody pick up the same band, Her2 band, around 170 kilodaltons in the cell lines and also in the tissue lysate. And if you compare the expression profile from this antibody It is consistent with the expression data that you can get from the public database, such as Protein Atlas. So this also indicates the specificity of these antibodies. To summarize the first part of my talk, the antibody specificity can be started using Western blot analysis with different lysate samples, such as overexpression lysate or the endogenous lysate from cell lines or tissues. And it can also be started using different antibodies against the same protein target through this independent antibody analysis. And I also want to emphasize that OriGene offers a large collection of this tight overexpression lysate. And this lysate can be a very good positive control for the antibody validation. Now let's move on to the second part of my presentation. We have talked about how to use overexpression lysate to validate the specificity of antibodies. But to fully study the specificity of the antibody, we need a true negative control for our validation. And this will be the main topic for the second part of my presentation, which is using the knockout cell lysate to do the antibody validation. So first, let's talk about what is a knockout cell. Knockout cell is a genetic modified cell in which the expression of a particular gene is disrupted by the modification. So in wild-type cells, the gene can be expressed normally as a functional protein, but in knockout cell, both allele has been modified to interrupt the expression of the gene, so there's no protein expressed in the knockout cells. And a few years ago, gene knockout is very time-consuming and costly, and has very low success rate. So it is not practical to use the knockout cell samples as validation tools to do a large-scale antibody validation. But CRISPR technology has made the gene knockout more accessible. Compared to the other gene editing method, CRISPR is much easier to design, and with very high success rate, you can knock out a gene with a high efficiency. The workflow is also very simple. Now we can make a knockout cell within a few weeks with this new technology. This has greatly improved the standard of our antibody validation. We can now easily get making some true negative control, which is a knockout cell lysate, using this knockout cell lines and for the antibody validations. The next slide, I'm going to talk about how do we make knockout cell lysate in OriGene. So start from the wild-type HEC293 or HeLa cells. Using CRISPR technology, we can modify the genomic sequence around the target gene and disrupt the expression of this target gene from both alleles and make a double knockout cell. And use the double knockout cell and its parental wild-type cell, we can make a pair of this cell lysate for the future test. How do we use this lysate? This lysate can be used to verify the specificity of antibodies in the Western blot analysis. It can also be lyophilized and sell as a standard lysate product for customers. So now let's use some example to talk about the knockout validation using a knockout cell lysate. Again, here I'm using the data from the same anti-Her2 antibody that we have been talked previously. This is the UM50036 antibody. And this antibody the specificity of this antibody has been verified with overexpression lysate in Western blot and by the 10K protein chip, which has shown the data previously. And in this Western blot, we are using a knockout lysate prepared from the Her2 double knockout cell line and its parental wild-type HeLa cell lysate. So the left side of the data is the blot tested by this specific anti-Her2 antibody. The right side of the data is the same blot tested by the anti-beta-actin antibody to show the equal loading of these two lysates on the gel. From this data, we can see this anti-Her2 antibody can pick up the specific human Her2 protein in the wild-type lysate and shows no signal in the knockout lysate. And of course, the beta-actin control shows an equal loading of these two lysates. So this actually provides another strong evidence for the specificity of these antibodies through a negative control. Together with those positive lysate and template protein chip results, this gave us a solid data set for the specificity of these antibodies. An antibody that has been validated using this method is called knockout validated antibodies in OriGene. We have about 493 antibodies validated using this method. Here I'm showing you a few examples of our knockout validated antibodies. And you can see all of these antibodies are validated, can pick up the single band in the wild-type samples and has no signals in the knockout lysate. And we also use different loading control antibody to prove the equal loading of these two lysates on the gel. This loading control are picked up so that they can run at different molecular weight as the target protein. These are the ideal results you want to see when you use knockout cell lysate to validate antibodies. But sometimes we do see a different result from the knockout validations, like what I've shown here for the Notch1 antibodies. This antibody not only pick up the specific Notch1 band, it also pick up another non-specific band in both wild-type and knockout lysate. And this antibody, we also call it knockout validated antibody, but it is just a partially specific antibody, and it can use for only certain applications. In some rare cases, we also see the antibody can pick up similar bands from both wild-type and knockout samples with the same intensity. So this indicates antibody is not specific for the protein, and for this type of antibody, we'll have to remove it from our website. In summary, the knockout lysate can be used as a true negative control for the Western blot analysis for our antibody validations. And I also want to mention that we are now having more than 1,000 knockout lysates made from this CRISPR technology. And we use this lysate, we have verified almost 500 antibodies. So this will bring to the last part of my presentation, which is OriGene knockout lysate and knockout validated antibodies. First, let's talk about the OriGene knockout lysate. Like I mentioned before, OriGene provides more than 1,000 ready-to-use knockout cell lysates that include a lot of hot targets such as p53, AKT1, EGFR, STAT3. All of these targets are very popular protein targets in the cancer research field. And each of these knockout lysates is supplied with its parental lysate. That is either H293 or HeLa cell lysate. So this here I'm showing an image of this knockout cell lysate. The shipped in the box contains 1 well of the 100 microgram of knockout lysate and 1 well of 100 microgram of the parental cell lysate. So next I want to show you how to find this knockout lysate on our website. You can search the lysate from the top right corner of our web page and refine your search using the left panel on the search page. For example, if you want to search the ERBB2 knockout lysate, you put ERBB2 gene name in the search box, and you find all the products for the ERBB2 gene. We have around 509 products for the human ERBB2 gene. That include a lot of expression cDNA clones, antibodies, proteins, and the small RNA product. If you want a knockout lysate, can be found under the protein category. So here you see we have only one knockout lysate for this ERBB2 gene. And if you click on that, you refine your search to this single product, and that's the LC810070. That's the knockout lysate for the human ERBB2 protein. Another way to search the knockout lysate is using our in-category search box. Here I list the URL for the knockout lysate product page. We have a lot of information on that page too, and we also have the mini search box on this page. So you can put ERBB2 name here to do an in-category search from this same product. And all of these knockout lysates are made from the verified knockout cell lines. You can find the verified genomic DNA sequence from each individual knockout lysate product page. Here I'm showing you an example of PAC2 human knockout lysate product. And if you click on the sequence, you will see the exact modification around this PAC2 gene. Here I show you like 2 bit insertion in both alleles that cause a frame shift and interruption of the expression of PAC2 genes. That's it for the knockout lysate. Next, I want to talk about another knockout product we offer, which is the knockout antibodies. So OriGene has incorporated knockout validation for our antibody validation since last year, and now we have about 493 antibodies validated by this knockout cell lysate. And the list is constantly growing with the development of the new knockout lysate and new antibodies. And how do we find those knockout validated antibodies from the website? Again, if you search the gene, you can refine your search on the left side of the search page. The knockout antibody is under the primary antibody category, and you can filter the result with a knockout validation filter. And each of the knockout validated antibodies is clearly labeled with a knockout check marker. And this same check marker can be found on the individual product page. You can also find the validation data by clicking on this image and all the product data sheet of the knockout validated antibody. We have a lot more information about knockout validation and knockout product on our website. We also have a short video talking about the knockout validation. So I have listed the URL of this website at the bottom of this slide. I do encourage you to browse our website and watch this short video to learn more about this new exciting technology. With that being said, I want to wrap up my presentation with some take-home message. So OriGene offers both positive and negative controls for your antibody validation. For the positive control, we have more than 18,000 overexpression cell lysate. And for the negative, we have more than 1,000 knockout cell lysate. Those two controls will give you a solid data to prove the specificity of your antibody. Doesn't matter whether this antibody is the in-home made or get from other companies. And you can prove the specificity of the antibodies, and you have more confidence to use that antibody to generate some convincing data. Not only we sell these controls for our customer, we also use these controls to validate our own antibodies. Like I mentioned before, most of our antibodies have been validated with our overexpression lysate in Western blot. We also have almost 500 antibodies being validated using the knockout cell lysate. So this is the high quality antibody that you can trust for your research. With that being said, I'll stop here and take any question if you have, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Xiaojie. So yeah, now the presentation is complete, and now the floor is open for questions. You are still muted, so the question can be presented through the question box on your control panel. Just type in the questions, and we'll go through them. So here we have our first questions. How valuable are the partially specific antibody in the market? Do customers buy them at all? Okay. So Xiao, do you want to address that? How valuable are the partially specific antibody in the market?
So the partially specific antibody is the antibody that can still pick up the specific signal for the target genes. And that those antibodies are very useful. If you don't have any better antibody in the market, you can use that antibody for the Western blot analysis. You just have to carefully get the conclusion from those data. So
basically, if in this case, even though it's unspecific, but that's because we are doing this assay that we really displayed this partial specificity. And fortunately, in this case, actually we can bring back the slide if we have that slide. The cross-reactive band is of a different molecular weight than the specific one, and so this way, actually, you can tell the specific recognition compared to the non-specific recognition. So on the Western blot, when the proteins are separated by molecular weight, in this way, the